The story begins in the heart of New York City, where the streets buzz with energy and ambition. It's a crisp Monday morning, and the sun casts golden rays over towering skyscrapers. Among the crowd walking briskly toward their destinations is Maya Carter, a young and accomplished woman who has already achieved more than most people dream of by her age. Maya owns a chain of banks spread across the country, but today, she isn't dressed in her usual power suits or designer heels. Instead, she wears a simple pair of jeans, a plain sweater, and sneakers, her version of blending into the crowd. Maya has a habit of visiting her branches incognito to observe how her employees interact with customers. She believes that seeing things from the ground level helps her stay connected to the reality of her business. Today, however, this unassuming visit would lead to an experience she'll never forget. As Maya approaches one of her busiest branches, she notices a long line of customers waiting impatiently at the counters. There's an unusual tension in the air, and it doesn't take long for her to figure out why. A tall man with slicked back hair stands behind the counter, barking orders and snapping at anyone who asks too many questions. His name tag reads Greg, and his demeanor screams arrogance. He glares at customers, rolls his eyes when they hesitate, and speaks to them as if they're wasting his precious time. One elderly woman tries to deposit a check, but struggles to fill out the form correctly due to shaky hands. Greg sighs loudly and mutters, "Can't you read? This isn't rocket science." The woman looks embarrassed, clutching the pen tightly as tears well up in her eyes. Another customer, a young father holding his toddler, asks about opening a savings account for his child. Greg interrupts him mid-sentence, saying, "Do I look like a babysitter to you? Go online and figure it out yourself." Maya watches all of this unfold quietly, her jaw tightening with each rude comment. She knows that running a bank requires efficiency, but treating customers poorly is unacceptable. Determined to test the situation herself, she steps into the line and waits patiently for her turn. When she finally reaches the counter, Greg barely glances at her before demanding, "What do you want?" Maya takes a deep breath and says calmly, "Hi, I need some help with my account. I think there might be a small issue with a transaction." She smiles politely, hoping to ease the tension, but Greg isn't interested in being friendly. Without looking up, he snaps, "Then why didn't you call customer service instead of wasting everyone's time here?" Maya tries again, explaining gently, "I thought it would be faster to come in person. Could you please check for me?" Her tone is respectful, but Greg seems annoyed by her presence. He slams a piece of paper onto the counter and barks, "Fill this out first, then we'll see. And make sure you get it right this time." Feeling frustrated but determined not to lose her cool, Maya picks up the pen and starts filling out the form. However, midway through, she pauses to ask a clarifying question about one of the fields. Before she can finish speaking, Greg cuts her off sharply. "Are you serious right now?" he exclaims, throwing his hands in the air. "Do you even know how to write your own name?" The room grows quiet as other customers turn to watch the exchange. Maya feels heat rising in her cheeks, but she keeps her voice steady. "I'm just trying to understand." "Oh, you're holding up the line," Greg interrupts, pointing accusingly at her. "If you can't handle basic tasks, maybe you shouldn't have an account here." At this point, Maya realizes that Greg isn't going to listen to reason. She decides to step aside and let someone else go ahead of her, planning to address the issue later. But Greg isn't done yet. In a move that shocks everyone present, he leans over the counter and grabs her, arm roughly pulling her closer. "Come on, move," he growls, dragging her toward the exit. Maya jerks away instinctively, her heart pounding. "Let go of me," she demands, raising her voice for the first time. But Greg ignores her protests and calls for security. Within moments, two burly guards appear, flanking Maya on either side. One of them grips her elbow firmly while the other ushers her toward the door. Customers gasp and murmur among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Outside, Maya finds herself standing on the sidewalk, anger coursing through her veins. She pulls out her phone and dials her lawyer, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. As she paces back and forth, she thinks about Greg's behavior, not just toward her, but toward every single person inside that bank. He had no idea who I am, she muses bitterly. But that doesn't excuse treating people like dirt. Determined to teach Greg a lesson he won't soon forget, Maya makes a decision. She spends the rest of the day gathering evidence, reviewing surveillance footage, and consulting with her team. By the time evening rolls around, she has a plan in place. Tomorrow, Greg will learn exactly who he messed with, and it won't end well for him. For now, though, Maya allows herself a moment of reflection. She thinks about the elderly woman who cried because of Greg's harsh words, the young father, who left feeling humiliated, and all the others who endured similar treatment. This isn't just about me, she realizes. It's about setting an example, for Greg, for the staff, and for anyone else who thinks it's okay to mistreat others. With renewed resolve, Maya climbs into her car and drives home, ready to face whatever comes next. The next morning, Maya wakes up early, her mind buzzing with anticipation. She spends extra time getting ready, choosing a sleek black suit paired with a bold red blouse, a deliberate choice to command attention. Her heels click sharply against the marble floors of her penthouse apartment as she double-checks her appearance in the mirror. Today isn't just another day at work. It's the day Greg will realize the magnitude of his mistake. Arriving at corporate headquarters, Maya gathers her top executives in the boardroom for a quick briefing. On the large screen mounted on the wall, she plays the surveillance footage from yesterday's incident. The video captures every detail: Greg's dismissive attitude, his aggressive behavior, and the moment he physically grabbed Maya's arm. The room falls silent as everyone watches, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outrage. "This is unacceptable," says one executive, breaking the silence. Another adds, "We should press charges immediately." But Maya shakes her head thoughtfully. While part of her wants justice served swiftly, she knows that firing Greg outright won't be enough. She needs to make sure this becomes a teachable moment, not just for him, but for the entire staff. "We're not going to ruin his life," Maya declares firmly, leaning forward in her chair. "But I want him to understand the gravity of what he did. He disrespected a customer, me, and treated others horribly too. That kind of behavior has no place in our company." With that, Maya outlines her plan. She'll return to the same branch later that morning, this time making her presence known as the owner of the bank. She'll address the staff directly, exposing Greg's actions and holding him accountable. Her team nods in agreement, impressed by her composure and determination. An hour later, Maya steps out of a sleek black car parked outside the branch where she was humiliated the previous day. This time she's accompanied by two senior executives, both dressed impeccably in business attire. As they walk through the glass doors, heads turn instantly. Customers whisper among themselves, curious about the sudden arrival of such high-profile visitors. Greg, stationed behind the counter, barely notices at first. When he does glance up, his face hardens into a scowl. "Well, well," Greg mutters sarcastically under his breath. "Looks like troublemaker number one decided to come back for more." He crosses his arms defiantly, watching as Maya approaches the manager's office without hesitation. Inside the office, Maya introduces herself to the flustered branch manager, who stammers apologies upon realizing who she is. "Ms. Carter, I had no idea you were here yesterday," he says nervously. "If I'd known—" "It's fine," Maya interrupts calmly. "You weren't the one behaving badly. Let's focus on addressing the real issue." She explains her plan to confront Greg publicly, ensuring that the rest of the staff understands the importance of treating customers with respect. The manager agrees wholeheartedly, grateful for her guidance. When Maya emerges from the office moments later, the entire branch goes silent. All eyes are on her as she strides confidently to the center of the room. With a commanding voice, she addresses the staff. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Carter, and I am the CEO of this bank. Yesterday, I visited this branch undercover to evaluate how we treat our customers. Unfortunately, what I experienced was far from acceptable." Greg freezes mid-task, his face pale as realization dawns. He opens his mouth to protest, but Maya cuts him off before he can speak. "One of your colleagues, Greg, was particularly unprofessional. Not only did he disrespect me as a customer, but he also physically assaulted me and called security to remove me from the premises. Does anyone care to guess who I am? The room erupts in gasps as the truth sinks in. Some employees cover their mouths in shock while others exchange horrified glances. Greg, visibly sweating now, attempts to defend himself. Wait, he blurts out desperately. I didn't know it was you. I was just doing my job. Maya raises an eyebrow, her expression icy. Your job is to serve customers with respect and professionalism. Nothing excuses the way you behaved yesterday or any other day for that matter. Effective immediately, you're fired. The announcement sends ripples through the room. Whispers break out as Greg stands frozen, unable to process what just happened. For a brief moment, he looks like he might argue further, but instead, he storms off toward the exit, slamming the door behind him. The remaining staff members exchange uneasy glances, unsure of what to say or do. Maya turns back to them, her tone softening slightly. Let me be clear. This isn't about punishing someone for making a mistake. It's about setting standards. Every single one of you represents this company. If a customer walks away feeling disrespected, then we've failed. From now on, I expect nothing less than excellence in service and kindness in every interaction. Her words resonate deeply with the staff, many of whom nod in agreement. A few even clap quietly, relieved that such toxic behavior won't be tolerated anymore. Maya concludes her speech by promising additional training sessions focused on improving customer relations. Then, with a final nod, she leaves the branch alongside her executives, leaving behind a mix of awe and unease. Later that afternoon, news of the dramatic confrontation spreads rapidly. Local reporters catch wind of the story and begin investigating. By evening, headlines scream variations of bank CEO fired employee who assaulted her during undercover visit. Social media explodes with reactions, ranging from praise for Maya's boldness to criticism of Greg's conduct. People share memes mocking Greg's downfall, while others commend Maya for taking a stand against workplace bullying. As the story gains traction, Maya receives countless messages of support. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers congratulate her for handling the situation with grace and authority. However, not everyone is pleased. Some critics argue that firing Greg was too harsh, pointing out that he'd worked at the bank for several years. Others accuse Maya of using her power to humiliate him unnecessarily. Despite the backlash, Maya remains unfazed. She grants an interview to a prominent news channel, explaining her perspective to a national audience. Sitting across from the anchor, she speaks candidly about why she made the decision she did. It's not about revenge or punishing someone for a single mistake, she emphasizes. It's about accountability. Our company values respect and integrity above all else. If you can't uphold those principles, then you're not the right fit for our organization. Her response earns widespread admiration, solidifying her reputation as a leader who prioritizes ethics over convenience. Viewers flood social media with comments praising her courage and transparency. Meanwhile, Greg finds himself thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Potential employers hesitate to hire him after learning about his dismissal, and his personal life begins to unravel under the weight of public scrutiny. Yet despite everything, Maya feels a flicker of empathy for Greg. She knows firsthand how difficult it can be to rebuild after a professional setback. Late one night, she drafts an email offering him access to career counseling services paid for by the bank. It's a gesture of goodwill, one last opportunity to help him grow. Whether he accepts it or not is entirely up to him. For now, Maya focuses on the bigger picture. The incident has sparked important conversations about workplace culture and customer service standards. Across the company, employees undergo mandatory training sessions designed to foster empathy and improve communication skills. Morale improves significantly, and customer satisfaction ratings soar. What started as a humiliating experience transforms into a defining moment, not just for Maya, but for the entire organization. As she sits alone in her office that evening, reflecting on the whirlwind of events, Maya allows herself a small smile. She knows there will always be challenges ahead, but she's ready to face them head-on. After all, true leadership isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about navigating it with purpose and integrity. And in that regard, Maya Carter has proven herself unstoppable. The days following the dramatic showdown at the bank branch were anything but quiet. News of Maya Carter's bold move spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and sparking heated debates across social media platforms. Local news stations aired segments dissecting every detail of the incident, while talk shows invited experts to weigh in on workplace ethics and leadership accountability. Maya herself became a household name overnight, admired by some for her decisive actions and criticized by others who felt she had overreacted. Greg, on the other hand, found himself at the center of a very different kind of storm. Once a relatively anonymous figure working behind the counter, he was now infamous, a cautionary tale about what happens when arrogance meets authority. His dismissal from the bank quickly became public knowledge, making it nearly impossible for him to secure another job in the banking industry. Potential employers hesitated to hire someone whose reputation had been tarnished so publicly. Friends distanced themselves, embarrassed by association, and even his family struggled to understand how things had spiraled out of control so fast. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Greg refused to take responsibility for his actions. In interviews with tabloids eager to capitalize on the scandal, he painted himself as a victim of circumstance. "I didn't know she was the CEO," he protested repeatedly. "If I'd known, I would have treated her differently. It's not fair that my career is ruined because of one bad day." His excuses fell flat with most people, but they resonated with a small group of supporters who sympathized with his plight. Meanwhile, Maya faced her own share of criticism. Some argued that firing Greg was too extreme, suggesting that a suspension or reprimand might have sufficed. Others accused her of using her power to humiliate him unnecessarily, claiming she should have handled the situation privately instead of calling him out in front of his colleagues. A few disgruntled former employees came forward, alleging similar incidents of harsh treatment during their time at the bank. These accusations fueled speculation that Maya's decision was less about justice and more about protecting her image. But Maya remained steadfast in her convictions. During an appearance on a popular morning talk show, she addressed the backlash head-on. Sitting across from the host, she spoke candidly about the challenges of running a large corporation and the importance of setting clear expectations for employees. "This isn't about revenge," she emphasized, her voice calm but firm. "It's about creating a culture where everyone feels valued and respected. If someone can't meet those standards, then they're not the right fit for our organization." Her words struck a chord with viewers, many of whom praised her for standing up to toxic behavior in the workplace. Social media lit up with messages of support, with hashtags like "Respect at Work" trending nationwide. Women, in particular, rallied behind Maya, seeing her as a symbol of empowerment and resilience. For years, stories of mistreatment and discrimination in corporate settings had gone unaddressed. Maya's actions offered a glimmer of hope that change was possible. Still, Maya couldn't ignore the toll the controversy was taking on Greg. Though she believed strongly in holding him accountable, she also recognized the value of second chances. Late one evening, after a long day of meetings and media appearances, she sat down at her desk and drafted a heartfelt email. Addressing Greg directly, she acknowledged the difficulty of losing his job and expressed regret for any unintended consequences her actions may have caused. However, she made it clear that his behavior had crossed a line and needed to be addressed. "I don't hold grudges," she wrote. "What happened between us doesn't define you as a person. You have the opportunity to learn from this experience and grow. To help you move forward, I'm offering access to career counseling services paid for by the bank. This is my way of extending grace while maintaining accountability." She hit send without hesitation, knowing that the ball was now in Greg's court. Whether he chose to accept her offer or not was entirely up to him. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm for both Maya and Greg. For Maya, the spotlight brought opportunities to expand her influence beyond the banking world. Invitations poured in for speaking engagements, panel discussions, and charity events. She used these platforms to advocate for workplace reform, emphasizing the need for empathy, diversity, and inclusion in all industries. Her speeches often included anecdotes from her own experiences, including the infamous encounter with Greg, which she framed as a lesson in leadership and accountability. Her efforts earned her widespread recognition, culminating in an invitation to deliver the keynote address at a prestigious business conference. Standing before a packed auditorium filled with executives, entrepreneurs, and aspiring leaders, Maya shared her journey with humility and passion. True leadership isn't about wielding power, she told the audience. It's about using your influence to inspire change. Sometimes that means making tough decisions, like firing someone who consistently disrespects others. Other times it means extending compassion, even to those who don't deserve it. Her message resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. As she stepped off stage, attendees lined up to thank her personally, sharing stories of how her words had inspired them to rethink their own approaches to leadership. Maya left the event feeling fulfilled, knowing she had planted seeds of change that would continue to grow long after the applause faded. For Greg, the road to redemption proved far more challenging. After initially ignoring Maya's email, he eventually reached out to accept her offer of career counseling. Over the course of several months, he worked closely with a counselor to identify patterns of behavior that had contributed to his downfall. Through introspection and hard work, he began to recognize the impact his words and actions had on others. Slowly but surely, he started to rebuild his confidence and his character. By the end of the year, Greg secured a position at a local nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy. The role was a far cry from his previous job, requiring patience, empathy, and a genuine desire to help others. At first, he struggled to adapt to the slower pace and less glamorous nature of the work. But over time, he discovered a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. Teaching underprivileged communities how to manage their finances gave him a renewed sense of meaning, helping him shed the bitterness he'd carried since his dismissal. One evening, as Greg prepared to leave the office, he received an unexpected notification on his phone. It was an email from Maya, congratulating him on his new role and expressing pride in the progress he'd made. "Change isn't easy," she wrote, "but you've shown incredible strength and determination. Keep going. You're capable of amazing things." Tears welled up in Greg's eyes as he read her words. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel hopeful about the future. He replied briefly, thanking her for her kindness and vowing to continue improving. Though their paths were unlikely to cross again, he knew he owed her a debt of gratitude, one he could repay only by living up to the potential she saw in him. As the year drew to a close, Maya reflected on everything that had transpired since that fateful Monday morning. What began as a humiliating experience had transformed into a catalyst for growth, not just for herself but for countless others. The incident forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about workplace culture and inspired her to lead with greater intentionality. It also reminded her of the power of forgiveness and the importance of giving people room to evolve. Sitting in her office overlooking the city skyline, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about the elderly woman who cried because of Greg's harsh words, the young father who left feeling humiliated, and all the others who endured similar treatment. Most importantly, she thought about the difference one person could make by choosing to stand up for what's right. With a deep sense of satisfaction, Maya closed her laptop and stood up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps even new mistakes. But she was ready. After all, true leadership wasn't about avoiding conflict, it was about navigating it with purpose, integrity, and heart. And in that regard, Maya Carter had proven herself unstoppable. Months passed since the incident at the bank, and life had settled into a new rhythm for both Maya Carter and Greg. For Maya, her bold decision to fire Greg in front of his colleagues became a defining moment, not just for her company, but also for her personal legacy as a leader. The media storm eventually died down, replaced by quieter conversations about workplace culture, accountability, and the importance of treating others with respect. Her actions inspired many, especially women and minorities who often face similar mistreatment in professional settings. Maya continued to push for change within her organization, implementing sweeping reforms aimed at fostering a more inclusive and respectful environment. She introduced mandatory training programs focused on customer service, conflict resolution, and empathy. Employees were encouraged to share feedback anonymously through a new hotline, ensuring that everyone felt heard, without fear of retaliation. These initiatives not only improved morale among staff but also led to a noticeable increase in customer satisfaction ratings. Customers reported feeling valued and respected during their interactions, a testament to the positive shift taking place. But Maya didn't stop there. Recognizing the broader impact of her story, she expanded her efforts beyond the walls of her own company. She partnered with advocacy groups to promote workplace equality and combat bullying in all industries. Through keynote speeches, workshops, and interviews, she shared her experiences openly, urging other leaders to prioritize ethics over convenience. Real success isn't measured by profits alone, she often said. It's measured by the lives we touch along the way. Her message resonated deeply, earning her invitations to prestigious events worldwide. At one such conference held in London, Maya delivered a powerful speech titled, "Leadership Without Compromise." Standing before an audience of global executives, entrepreneurs, and policymakers, she recounted the events of that infamous Monday morning. "When I walked into that branch undercover, I expected professionalism, not perfection, but basic human decency," she began. "Instead, I encountered arrogance, disrespect, and ultimately violence. It was a wake-up call, for me, for my company, and hopefully for others." She went on to explain how the incident shaped her approach to leadership. "Firing Greg wasn't easy, nor was it something I took lightly. But sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect the values your organization stands for. Accountability is non-negotiable. If we don't hold ourselves and each other to higher standards, nothing will ever change." The audience listened, intently captivated by her authenticity and conviction. When she concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. Attendees lined up afterward to thank her personally, sharing stories of how her words had inspired them to take action in their own workplaces. One attendee, a young woman named Sarah, approached Maya with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me the courage to speak up after years of staying silent," she confessed. "Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like." Moments like these reaffirmed Maya's belief that her decision, though controversial, had been the right one. She returned home from the conference energized and determined to keep pushing boundaries. Under her guidance, the bank launched a community outreach program designed to educate underserved populations about financial literacy. Branches hosted free workshops, teaching skills like budgeting, saving, and investing. The initiative received widespread praise, further solidifying Maya's reputation as a compassionate yet formidable leader. Meanwhile, Greg's journey toward redemption was far less glamorous, but no less significant. After accepting Maya's offer of career counseling, he embarked on a path of self-reflection and growth. At first, the process was grueling. He struggled to confront the reality of his behavior, often deflecting blame onto external factors like stress or poor management. But his counselor, a patient and insightful woman named Linda, refused to let him off the hook. "You can't move forward until you take full responsibility for your actions," she told him firmly during one session. "Yes, circumstances matter, but so do choices, and yours hurt people." Over time, Greg began to see things differently. Through role-playing exercises and journaling assignments, he gained insight into how his words and actions affected those around him. He realized that his dismissive attitude stemmed from insecurity, a desperate need to assert authority in a world where he often felt powerless. Once he understood this, he started working on changing his mindset. Instead of viewing customers as obstacles to overcome, he learned to see them as individuals deserving of kindness and patience. By the end of the counseling program, Greg was a changed man, or at least well on his way to becoming one. Armed with newfound confidence and a fresh perspective, he applied for jobs outside the banking industry. Though rejection letters piled up initially, he persevered, determined to prove himself worthy of a second chance. Eventually, he landed a position at a local nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy. The role required humility, empathy, and a genuine desire to help others, qualities Greg hadn't possessed before but was eager to cultivate. His first few months at the nonprofit were challenging. Used to the fast-paced, transactional nature of banking, Greg found it difficult to adjust to the slower pace and relational focus of his new job. Teaching underprivileged communities how to manage their finances demanded patience and creativity, skills he hadn't fully developed yet. There were days when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, but he reminded himself why he'd chosen this path. Each small victory, whether it was helping a single mother create a budget or guiding a teenager through opening their first savings account, reinforced his commitment to doing better. One evening, as Greg prepared to leave the office, he noticed an email notification flashing on his phone. It was from Maya Carter. His heart skipped a beat as he opened the message, half expecting criticism or judgment. To his surprise, her tone was warm and encouraging. "I wanted to congratulate you on your new role," she wrote. "It takes courage to start over, especially after everything you've been through. Keep going. You're capable of amazing things." Greg stared at the screen, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. Gratitude, shame, and hope swirled inside him as he reread her words. For so long he'd viewed Maya as the enemy, the person who ruined his life. But now he saw her differently, as someone who held him accountable while still offering grace. He replied briefly, thanking her for her support and promising to continue improving. Though they would likely never meet again, he knew he owed her a debt of gratitude, one he could repay only by living up to the potential she believed he had. As the year drew to a close, Maya reflected on everything that had transpired since that fateful Monday morning. What began as a humiliating experience had transformed into a catalyst for growth, not just for herself but for countless others. The incident forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about workplace culture and inspired her to lead with greater intentionality. It also reminded her of the power of forgiveness and the importance of giving people room to evolve. Sitting in her office overlooking the city skyline, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about the elderly woman who cried because of Greg's harsh words, the young father who left feeling humiliated, and all the others who endured similar treatment. Most importantly, she thought about the difference one person could make by choosing to stand up for what's right. With a deep sense of satisfaction, Maya closed her laptop and stood up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps even new mistakes. But she was ready. After all, true leadership wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about navigating it with purpose, integrity, and heart. And in that regard, Maya Carter had proven herself unstoppable. Little did she know, however, that her story was far from over. Unbeknownst to her, another chapter was about to unfold, one that would test her resolve in ways she couldn't yet imagine. As the months turned into a year, Maya Carter's influence continued to grow. Her story had become a beacon of hope for many, proof that standing up against injustice could lead to meaningful change. The reforms she implemented within her bank chain were hailed as groundbreaking, setting new standards for workplace culture and customer service across industries. Employees who once feared speaking out now felt empowered to voice their concerns, knowing they'd be heard without judgment. Customers too noticed the shift. Lines at counters moved faster, smiles replaced scowls, and interactions were marked by genuine warmth rather than robotic efficiency. Maya herself became a sought-after figure in the world of business leadership. From TED Talks to international summits, she shared her experiences with audiences eager to learn from her journey. But despite the accolades and admiration, Maya remained grounded. She knew that real success wasn't measured by headlines or awards. It was measured by the lives she touched and the values she upheld. Every morning as she sat at her desk reviewing reports and strategizing for the future, she reminded herself of this truth. One crisp autumn afternoon, Maya received an unexpected visitor at her corporate headquarters. A young woman named Elena stood nervously outside her office door, clutching a folder filled with documents. Elena was a recent college graduate who had just landed an internship at one of Maya's branches. Though excited about the opportunity, she quickly realized that not everyone shared Maya's vision for inclusivity and respect. One senior manager in particular seemed determined to make her life difficult. "He keeps assigning me tasks way below my skill level," Elena explained during their meeting. "And when I ask for more responsibility, he says things like, 'Maybe you're not ready yet.' It feels like he doesn't think I belong here." Maya listened intently, her expression thoughtful. Stories like Elena's weren't uncommon, even after all the progress her company had made. Change didn't happen overnight, especially in environments where old habits died hard. Still, hearing about such behavior angered her. She promised Elena that the issue would be addressed immediately and personally followed up with the branch manager later that day. This incident served as a reminder that while policies and training programs were essential, they weren't enough on their own. True transformation required constant vigilance and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Maya resolved to double down on her efforts, ensuring that every employee, from interns to executives, felt valued and respected. Meanwhile, Greg's life took another unexpected turn. After nearly a year working at the nonprofit, he found himself growing restless. While he loved helping others and appreciated the sense of purpose his job gave him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He missed certain aspects of banking, the thrill of closing deals, the satisfaction of solving complex problems, but not the toxic environment he'd left behind. What if there was a way to combine his newfound empathy with his professional expertise? Inspired by Maya's advocacy work, Greg decided to take a bold step. He enrolled in night classes to earn a certification in financial counseling, hoping to carve out a niche for himself in the industry. His goal was simple: to help people navigate the often confusing world of banking and finance without judgment or condescension. For someone like Greg, a former banker turned counselor, it was the perfect blend of past experience and present growth. The coursework proved challenging, forcing Greg to revisit concepts he hadn't thought about in years. But he approached it with determination, driven by the belief that he could make a difference. On weekends, he volunteered at community centers, offering free advice to anyone struggling with debt or unsure how to invest their savings. Slowly but surely, word of his services spread, earning him a loyal following. One evening, as Greg wrapped up a workshop at a local library, a familiar face appeared in the audience. It was Linda, the counselor who had helped him turn his life around. Seeing her brought back a flood of memories, both painful and hopeful. "I heard about what you've been doing," she said warmly. "You should be proud of yourself." Greg smiled, gratitude washing over him. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted. "You taught me how to see myself and others differently." Linda nodded approvingly. "You've come a long way, Greg. Keep going. There's still so much good you can do." Her words stayed with him long after they parted ways, fueling his resolve to keep pushing forward. Back at corporate headquarters, Maya faced a new challenge, one that tested her leadership in ways she hadn't anticipated. A rival bank launched a smear campaign against her company, accusing them of prioritizing image over substance. They claimed that Maya's emphasis on customer service came at the expense of profitability, painting her reforms as impractical and unsustainable. The accusations stung, not because they were true, but because they threatened to undermine everything she'd worked so hard to achieve. At first, Maya considered ignoring the attacks, confident that her track record spoke for itself. But as the campaign gained traction, even some of her own employees began to question whether her methods were worth the effort. Morale dipped slightly, and whispers of doubt echoed through the hallways. Realizing she couldn't afford to stay silent, Maya called an emergency meeting with her executive team. "We've built this company on principles of integrity and respect," she told them firmly. "If we start doubting ourselves now, we'll lose everything we fought for. We need to remind people why these values matter, not just for our customers, but for us as well." Together, they devised a plan to counter the smear campaign. Instead of responding defensively, they leaned into transparency. Maya released a detailed report showcasing the positive impact of her reforms: increased customer retention rates, higher employee satisfaction scores, and improved financial performance. She also invited journalists to tour several branches, giving them first-hand insight into the changes taking place. Finally, she launched a social media campaign featuring testimonials from employees and customers alike, highlighting the human side of her company's mission. The strategy worked. Within weeks, public opinion shifted decisively in Maya's favor. Critics who had initially dismissed her efforts as naive praised her for proving that kindness and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Even competitors begrudgingly acknowledged her success, albeit privately. As the year drew to a close, both Maya and Greg found themselves reflecting on how far they'd come since that fateful Monday morning. Maya hosted a company-wide gala to celebrate the achievements of her staff, handing out awards to those who exemplified the spirit of her reforms. Among the honorees was Elena, whose courage in speaking up inspired others to do the same. As Maya presented her with the award, she whispered, "Keep being brave. You're making a difference." Later that night, Greg attended a networking event for financial counselors, marking a significant milestone in his career. When asked to share his story, he hesitated briefly before speaking candidly about his past mistakes and the lessons he'd learned along the way. "I used to think success meant power," he admitted, "but now I know it means serving others, with humility and heart." His honesty earned him applause and several new clients eager to work with someone who understood their struggles. As he left the event, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't the same person he'd been before, nor did he want to be. Unbeknownst to either of them, fate had one final twist in store. A mutual acquaintance connected Maya and Greg, suggesting they collaborate on a project aimed at promoting ethical practices in the banking industry. Though hesitant at first, both agreed to meet, curious about what the other had become. When they finally sat down together, the air was thick with tension, but also possibility. As they talked, they discovered common ground, a shared commitment to creating a better, fairer system for everyone. By the end of their conversation, they shook hands, not as adversaries but as allies. Neither knew exactly where this partnership might lead. But one thing was certain: their journeys were far from over. And perhaps together, they could accomplish even more than they ever dreamed possible. The collaboration between Maya Carter and Greg marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that neither had anticipated, but both embraced with cautious optimism. Their initial meeting, filled with awkward silences and lingering tension, gradually gave way to meaningful conversations about their shared vision for the banking industry. Despite their vastly different backgrounds and past conflicts, they found themselves united by a common goal: to create a system where respect, empathy, and integrity were at the forefront. Maya proposed an initiative called Ethics in Action, a program designed to educate bankers and financial professionals on ethical practices while promoting inclusivity and accountability. The idea was simple yet ambitious: to transform the culture of banking from within, starting with training modules, workshops, and mentorship programs led by individuals who understood the importance of treating customers and each other with dignity. Greg, eager to contribute, volunteered to help develop content based on his experiences as both a perpetrator and recipient of toxic workplace behavior. Their partnership wasn't without its challenges. At first, skepticism loomed large. Some of Maya's colleagues questioned her decision to work with Greg, fearing it might undermine her credibility. Others doubted whether someone like Greg could truly change after years of entrenched habits. But Maya stood firm, reminding everyone that growth required forgiveness and trust. "If we can't give people second chances," she said during a board meeting, "then how can we expect them to believe in our mission?" Greg, for his part, worked tirelessly to prove himself worthy of Maya's faith. He poured his energy into crafting realistic scenarios for the training modules, drawing from his own mistakes to illustrate the consequences of poor behavior. One module focused on de-escalation techniques, teaching employees how to handle difficult situations without resorting to anger or condescension. Another highlighted the importance of active listening, encouraging participants to see customers as human beings rather than transactions. As word of the initiative spread, interest grew beyond Maya's company. Other banks began reaching out, curious to learn more about the program and how they could implement similar reforms. Within months, Ethics in Action evolved into a nationwide effort, attracting endorsements from influential figures across industries. Even critics who had once dismissed Maya's methods praised the tangible impact of her work, admitting that her approach addressed issues long ignored by traditional institutions. For Greg, the experience was transformative. Working alongside, Maya forced him to confront parts of himself he'd rather forget, but it also allowed him to rebuild his identity. No longer defined by his past actions, he became known as someone committed to making amends and driving positive change. His role in Ethics in Action earned him recognition not just within the nonprofit sector, but also among former peers who now saw him in a new light. One day, while presenting a workshop at a regional conference, Greg encountered an old colleague from his days at the bank. The man approached him hesitantly, clearly unsure of what to say. "I heard about what you've been doing," he began awkwardly. "It's impressive. I never thought I'd see you again, let alone like this." Greg smiled, appreciating the honesty. "People can surprise you," he replied. "Even themselves." By the end of the conversation, the two men exchanged contact information, agreeing to stay in touch. For Greg, moments like these reinforced the belief that redemption wasn't just possible, it was worth fighting for. Meanwhile, Maya continued to push boundaries, expanding her advocacy efforts globally. She traveled extensively, speaking at conferences and meeting with leaders from diverse fields. Her message remained consistent. True success comes from empowering others. Whether addressing a room full of executives or mentoring a young intern, she emphasized the importance of leading with compassion and purpose. Her influence extended beyond business, inspiring movements in education, healthcare, and politics. Schools adopted versions of her training programs to teach students about conflict resolution and emotional intelligence. Hospitals implemented similar frameworks to improve patient care. Politicians cited her work as a model for creating equitable policies. In many ways, Maya had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark monumental change. But despite her growing fame, Maya never lost sight of why she started this journey in the first place. Late one evening, as she sat alone in her office reviewing reports, she paused to reflect on everything that had transpired since that fateful Monday morning. What began as a humiliating experience had transformed into a catalyst for growth. Not just for herself, but for countless others. She remembered the elderly woman whose tears had moved her to act, the young father who left feeling humiliated, and all the faces she'd encountered along the way. Each story reminded her of the power of standing up for what's right even when it's hard. And though she knew there would always be challenges ahead, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing she'd made a difference. Years later, Maya and Greg reunited for the launch of a documentary chronicling their journey. Titled From Conflict to Collaboration, the film explored how two people from opposite ends of the spectrum came together to challenge systemic issues in the banking industry. It featured interviews with employees, customers, and community members whose lives had been touched by their efforts. At the premiere, held in a packed theater in New York City, Maya took the stage to deliver a heartfelt speech. "This isn't just my story or Greg's story," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "It's our story, the story of anyone who has ever dared to believe in something better. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen alone. But if we're willing to listen, learn, and grow, anything is possible." When Greg joined her on stage, the audience erupted in applause. Together they stood as living proof that accountability and grace could coexist, that healing was possible even after the deepest wounds. As the credits rolled and the lights came up, strangers turned to one another, inspired to take action in their own lives. Outside the theater, reporters swarmed around Maya and Greg, eager for sound bites and insights. But amidst the chaos, one moment stood out. A young boy, no older than 10, approached Maya shyly, holding a notebook and pen. "Can I have your autograph?" he asked softly. Maya knelt down to meet his gaze, smiling warmly. "Of course," she replied, signing the Yao page. Then, looking into his wide eyes, she added, "But remember this. Real heroes aren't the ones who sign autographs. They're the ones who stand up for what's right, even when it's scary. You have the power to be a hero, too." The boy nodded solemnly, clutching the notebook close as he walked away. Watching him leave, Maya felt a surge of hope. The future belonged to those brave enough to dream and act. And thanks to the lessons learned from her journey, she knew the world was in good hands. As she stepped into the cool night air, Maya glanced at Greg, who stood nearby chatting with attendees. Though their paths had diverged countless times over the years, their shared mission had brought them closer than ever. Together they had proven that transformation was possible, not through perfection, but through perseverance. And so, as the city lights twinkled above, Maya allowed herself a quiet smile. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps even new mistakes. But she was ready. After all, true leadership wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about navigating it with purpose, integrity, and heart. And in that regard, Maya Carter had proven herself unstoppable.